Are we now recording?
We are now recording.
Great. Good morning and welcome to this Metro Plan Orlando MAC meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is John Dowless and I'll be chairing the meeting today. We also have a team of folks working to ensure this meeting runs smoothly for us in the room and those listening online. As we continue to meet in person, all committee members are required to be physically present here in the Metro Plan Orlando boardroom for purposes of achieving a quorum. Staff will continue to stream for meetings online for public access. And to start today, we're going to have Commissioner Sal Ramos to lead us in invocation and then Commissioner Scott Kennedy in the pledge. If I'll stand for a moment.
Bow our heads. Father God, thank you once again for entrusting us with your cities and towns here in Central Florida. Give us your wisdom and knowledge to make the best decisions for our citizens. May we honor you in all we say this morning. May you bless us all through these holidays. In your name we ask. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I feel kind of alone up here. I promise I took a shower. All right. This morning, I asked that everyone silence your phones and your smart devices. Good reminder. I do ask that all committee members wait to be recognized to speak and to activate your microphones before speaking and turning them back off when you're complete. There are two public comment points in the meeting. The first is for action items and the second for the comments of a general nature. You may provide your public comment in person, virtually over Zoom, or in advance by email or phone message. We want this and all future meetings to be accessible to all. Participants may join by computer, tablet, or phone. If you need accommodations to participate in the future, please contact Metro Plan Orlando. Ms. Larson.
Good morning, Chair and committee members on this cold morning. As it is our last meeting of 2024, I wanted to take a moment to thank you all for your dedication to the MAC throughout the year. And I wanted to wish you a safe and restful holiday season. So that's first off. So to talk about the agenda, so our agenda has a little bit of a shift since the last time we met. After my comments are complete, we'll have the safety moment. And then we'll hear from our agency partners before we do the roll call. Relating to the posted agenda, we have had a couple changes. First off is that Mr. Siaosi Fine of Florida's Turnpike Enterprise is unable to join us today. He didn't provide an update, but if you have any questions, please reach out to him or myself and we'll get your questions answered. However, we do still have our partners over at FDOT and Links to provide their agency updates. We also do have a change pertaining to a tip amendment action item, which is item 8B. Mr. Jason Sartorio from our staff will explain more during his presentation later in the agenda. Also, one of the presentations was left off of the agenda, so we will have 4 presentations instead of the printed 3. The presentation will be from Mr. Eric Hill of Metro Plan Orlando. And it will be on the electric vehicle EV readiness study. And Mr. Hill will be second in the lineup. Next, we have Mr. Vince Dyer here, and he'll be presenting on behalf of Ms. Emily Bush for the Best Foot Forward annual update presentation. And final amendment to the agenda is under upcoming meetings, we have the Central Florida Commuter Rail Commission as one of the items. That meeting was canceled, so don't attend that. And that is it for the amendments to the agenda and concludes my remarks. So now we will hear from Mr. Mike Wilson on the safety moment.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. This first week in December is Older Driver Safety Awareness Week, nationally and statewide. And so we'll cover that topic. And as we usually do, give you the numbers first. And there are about 48 on average fatal crashes per year involving a driver 65 and older. It doesn't mean that the older person was the fatality, but just that they were involved in a fatal crash. And similarly, then with fatal and serious nearly 250 per year. But what's interesting, when you look at it on a per capita basis, and not surprisingly, older drivers actually have fewer crashes, right? We are more experienced. I say we because I'll be joining this age cohort next year, so. So we have more experience, and even for nighttime, we know nighttime is a bigger issue at night vision. You can see there, less than half of when it comes from a rate standpoint. So we know our limitations and account for that. But there are still other challenges, and we always want to improve. And so there are resources, and the state has its Safe Mobility FL.com website for older drivers, not only for older drivers, but for those who know an older driver. There's self-assessment tests and safety questionnaires. Whether you are an older driver or you know someone who is, you can enter in what issues you see, and they can give you good feedback. Courses available, and it's not just about drivers. Whatever mode we're using, age can have an impact on various factors, and so there's guidance for all of that on that site. And that's it for older drivers. I want to also give you an update on our Vision Zero efforts. You may have heard that a new round of grants were awarded, and we were one of the recipients of that. You can see over $2 million that MetroPlan will receive to continue our work doing road safety audits, increasing our education and outreach efforts, and consolidating all the plans that you all have been working on so that we have a nice integrated system of plans that we're all operating from the same set of assumptions and plans going forward. But not just MetroPlan Orlando, Orange County also received over $800,000 for some targeted safety solutions. The Sanford Airport Authority will be doing its own safety action plan with some funding from the federal highway. University of Central Florida will be helping out Lake and Sumter counties with some pilot projects. And then the City of Castleberry also received over $1 million to do some demonstration projects based on the plan that they recently completed. So that completes my safety moment this morning. Be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go into agency reports, and to lead us off from FDOT, Ms. Beckman, welcome.
Good morning. I know I'm usually over there, so I apologize. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving break. I'm going to keep my presentation very short today. First things first, I would like to point out to you that we are in the time of year where we're in our tentative work program. For those of you who may be newer to the world, our tentative work program is our 5-year basic budget, basically how we plan to spend the income that we receive from the state and grants and whatnot. So it did open up just on Monday. It is available online. There's the website above you. There's also a QR code if you'd like. It'll take you directly to our website. There's a virtual hearing all of this week where you can kind of go in and see things at that website. There's additionally at the bottom of that website link, there is a comment form where you can make comments on any questions you may have, any commentary that you might have on anything on the work program. So I urge you to go ahead and look at that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on that work program website so that they can assist you as well. So first things first, also, we do have our Florida FTP continuing to go on, our Florida Transportation Plan. That is our long range plan. It is also available at www.floridaftp.com. I urge you to continue to participate. There are subcommittees that are tackling different areas like resiliency and workforce development, things like that, so that you can be a part of that and have a say in our long range plan. Finally, finishing up just a little bit, we were able to kind of complete our second pass with our Hurricane Milton debris removal. We were able to remove over 35,000 cubic yards of debris just from Hurricane Milton. So that was quite the undertaking, but it has now completed, although I do know our friends up in the Panhandle. I drove through Tallahassee recently and they're still picking up along I-10. They're still cutting down trees. So keeping those guys in our thoughts. One event I wanted to bring to your attention, particularly particularly, pardon me, those of you who are bicyclists, the Jordan Samalski Sporting Goods Store. The 11th annual is going to be taking place on Saturday, December 14th from 7:30 to 5. It is going to be at 1965 South OBT in Apaka. And so it is a foundation where Jordan unfortunately passed away, and his parents started a foundation to give out used and new sporting goods equipment to children. He was a very active child. FDOT will be there. We will be helping to fit bicycle helmets. So if you have a need in your community, there is going to be bicycle fitting helmets and things there. We do give out quite a few. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. And two very quick road closure information. Central Florida Parkway is going to be closed. It started last night, tonight, and tomorrow from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. We do have to close it down to put some bridge debris, barriers up and stuff as we continue that work on that piece of Central Florida Parkway under I-4. And I wanted to celebrate the fact that the milling and resurfacing at 1792 at I-4 up in Seminole County has the milling and resurfacing portion of that safety project has been completed. So hopefully that'll help alleviate a little bit of that holiday traffic in the area by the zoo up there. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to hear them. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right, good deal. Next we have Ms. Witten with links.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just a few updates. Our average daily ridership still remains around 60,000, so no change since my report last month. We have our holiday buses out and going around. So if you see a bus with gnomes on it, it's gnome themed and Santa's driving. Your ride is free, so hop on. And lastly, we rolled out a new fare payment app at the end of November. So the app, it has two different things now. In addition to being able to buy passes through the app, you can now see where your bus is. If you know the route and the bus stop you're at, you can track it and see how much longer till your bus gets there. And we also now have tap to pay on the buses along with that. So you can pay with credit, debit, watch, phone, Apple Pay, Google Pay. So we're very excited to have that option for our customers now. So unless there's any questions, that's my update for the month.
Any? All right, no?
Thank you.
Now I don't see Mr. Fine in the room, so we don't have a report. Okay. Now we'll go to roll call. Lisa?
David,
Present.
Weaver for DeCiccio. Dowlis,
Here.
Foraker,
He was trying to get online.
he's not logged in.
Yeah, he's not there. Okay.
Gardner, Guthrie, Henson,
Here.
Kennedy,
Here.
McCann, Ramos,
Present.
Sackett, Slated,
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call, and we do have a request for an excused absence from Mayor Kevin McCann.
All right, and then I think Mayor Foraker just texted, said he was sick and why he wasn't here. So do we have a motion to excuse Mayor McCann and Mayor Forakers? Can we have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, please show that adopted. All right, we'll now hear public comments on action items. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record, and please hold public comments to 2 minutes or less. If any members of the public wish to comment and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll send you a prompt to unmute your mic. If you need accommodation to participate in the future, please contact Metro Plan Orlando. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make a comment?
Mr. Chairman, we have no hands raised online.
And do we have any members of the public attending in person?
I have not received any.
And any written comments?
There are
All
none.
right, we're on a roll. All right, we have 3 action items today. First one is approval of the November minutes. Did anyone have any changes or updates? We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, please show that adopted. Now we're going to go to Mr. Sartorio is going to walk us through the FDOT amendment. Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. This morning, I have several tip amendments for you, and additional information on these amendments is located in tab 2 of your agendas. As noted by Sarah during agenda review, we do have one change from what is provided in the packets this morning. At this time, Metro Plan Orlando staff is recommending pulling FM number 447104 from action today. This amendment item will be brought back following the review of additional information provided by FDOT. With that said, we do have 5 other action items for consideration today. One for a federal transit emissions discretionary grant received by Lynx. 2 other federal resilience grants received individually by both Orange County and Osceola County, focus on improving stormwater management. And then additionally, we have 2 items related to I-4 Beyond the Ultimate South, Moving Florida Forward initiative. The 2 projects will add 1 additional lane in each direction from west of State Road 429, or sorry, east of State US 27 to east of World Drive. As I mentioned earlier, you have some additional information on these amendments looking in tab 2 of your agendas. At this time, we are requesting approval of the items presented today, excluding FM number 447104-1, which is the resurfacing project on State Road 500 from State Road 50 to State Road 414, which will come back upon further review of additional information. Thank you.
There, do we have any questions? Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second? Who does second? Mayor Sladak? Oh. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please show that adopted. We are now on Amendment 3, Ms. Laurent, welcome.
Good morning. I'm here to present on a few proposed revisions to the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. I know you hear me talking about the 2050 one all the time. That's the update we're doing for next calendar year. But the 2045 document is the one that we adopted back in 2020, and we're maintaining and implementing until such time as the 2050 plan is adopted. So as we keep the 2045 plan up to date and alive as our living document, there are a few annual changes that we make this time every year. The first being our TIP refresh. So this is where we look at the entirety of the long-range plan and make sure that it's consistent with the first 5 years of the Transportation Improvement Program. So that way, as cost estimates are changing, we're making sure that those are reflected in the long-range plan and that they're one-to-one at this time every year. So these changes are really just administrative in nature, and they are consistent with all of the TIP amendments that we've had over the past 3 months as well, from those in October, November, and those presented by Jason here just a moment ago for today. With these administrative changes, there are no impacts to existing project cost feasibility. Our second item is very similar. In our Transportation Improvement Program, there is also a locally funded project section. So these are not federal or state funds. They're locally funded projects that are included there by reference for planning consistency to help elevate those projects. So we also include those within our long-range plan, again, for that planning consistency. So the addition and update of those projects is also included in this revision, and there are no impacts to existing cost feasibility because of that. Again, it's more administrative in nature, just like the TIP refresh. And then our third item are other minor revisions, again, for planning consistency. We do receive requests for a few minor updates as limits on projects change or cost estimates change for other items throughout the MTP. So that's what is really being included there. So in terms of tables 15 and 18, there was one change on the transit list to make sure that there weren't any duplicate needs. That way we weren't including 2 line items for the exact same project to occur. Then on table 18, Osceola County has requested the addition of a handful of developer funded projects. So those that are being completed through developer agreements. So while those aren't state, federal, or local funds, they're private funds being used for transportation infrastructure. We're including those to make sure that the needs are documented. So that way those projects can be considered by other planning agencies throughout the region as other projects are being included around the area. such as the Turnpike, FDOT, making sure that they know that those other projects are occurring. So with that, unless there are any questions, we are asking for your recommendation of approval of the proposed revisions as they've been presented today.
Any questions? Motion to approve? Did you get that, Lisa? Okay, great. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, please show that adopted. I believe we have you up next in the presentations as well. So don't go anywhere. First presentation is the 2050 Metro Plan Transportation Plan update. Welcome back.
Hello, I went so far away. So as we just kept the 2045 MTP up to date, keeping it a living document with where we are now, we are also working on getting ready for our next generation of projects within our region as we look to a new horizon of 2050. So you hear about this just about every meeting, so I'm going to kind of go through this. If you have any questions, please let me know. But to start us off, we have continued our outreach and engagement. During your last meeting, we did start giving you those engagement reports. So every outreach event that we're going to have, you'll be getting that information as soon as we compile it. So there have been 3 additional events that we've gone out to. So more interactions, more survey results, more feedback that we can use to help cultivate the plan. Those survey results are being compiled right now and will be included in your agenda packets in 2025, your next meeting. We are continuing our coordination efforts with the Central Florida Regional Planning Model Team, doing a little bit more background information, a little more review of the kind of base year socioeconomic data. So looking at the housing, population, and employment numbers to make sure that those are included accurately before we start looking at forecasts to 2050. So making sure that that's really dialed in. Then in terms of a lot of our other work, it's coming into the final recommendations and strategies development right now. That includes our housing, health, environmental stewardship, resilience, financial resources, and congestion management processes, which is kind of like a really big funnel of all of the background information that we're going to need and that we've been using to work on our needs assessment, which I'll come to in a moment, and really lays the foundation for what we're going to get into in 2025. So before I get too far ahead of myself, because I am excited, we're nearing a big milestone with the MTP, our needs assessment. So we've been coordinating with each of your agencies, each of our local jurisdictions, and the Department of Transportation to complete this needs assessment process. And we know it's been a lot of work across the entire region. So I do want to say thank you to you and your staffs, because this has been a lot to do. We've met with each of your teams about 3 times over the past 6 months. So in all, it's been about 90 meetings that we've done to make sure that the needs assessment is really dialed in. We started with looking at the state highway system needs by all of the different modal evaluations you see on the right-hand side of the screen. Then looked at the rest of the network, so off the state highway system, but still eligible for Metro Plan Orlando funding. And we just completed our final needs list reviews, where we took the entire network, the big list of 2,600 projects so far, and looked at it one last time for that final polish. We're going through and making those final edits based on the few comments we received, and then that will be completed by early next year. So we're very excited for that. So as we finish up that list of transportation to-dos throughout the region over the next 25 plus years, we then need to focus on how we're going to prioritize those projects, which one gets funded first. So the prioritization process, I talked a little bit about at our last meeting, so I'll go over this fairly quickly. But it's really meant to give us a data-driven, context-informed, and multimodal approach to making sure that we're fairly evaluating these projects consistently throughout the region. So we're using a very similar process to what we did in 2045, maintaining our 5 goal areas, but really simplifying it down from 28 criteria down to 15. So it's a little bit easier for everyone to follow, but still maintaining the right information to be able to fairly and consistently evaluate these projects. So as we look at the goal weighting, so how the prioritization points are allocated by those 5 primary goal areas, these are the percentages that we talked about at our last meeting that were developed based on a survey completed of our MTP technical workshop participants. So we know kind of where our thoughts and are leaning towards throughout the region. that next step was, how do you measure our 5 goal areas? How do you measure safety? How do you measure community? So these are the evaluation criteria, 3 per goal area, that have been selected, draft form. It's going to be reviewed by TAC tomorrow, to make sure that we're looking at each of these items consistently. So as we then look at those evaluation criteria, we need to look at the scoring range. What gets maximum high points for that criteria? What may be a high item and what may be low? So we can look at those projects and be able to see that disparity of priority points and know what really boils to the top of needing to be at the top of that project list. So as that's being evaluated and refined, again, TAC's going to get it tomorrow. Once all of that done, the math and priority points are done, we then apply it to each of our 7 modal programs, just like we have in the 2045 plan. But this time around, we're adding a few additional criteria, or modal programs, the one being safety, and the other is really splitting up our bicycle and pedestrian list into 3 more detailed lists, separating out those critical sidewalks, which were previously identified in the 2045 plan, school mobility, and then our general active transportation projects from there. They don't fall into those other 2 categories. So with that, we're reaching the halfway point with our 2050 MTPs development, which is a big milestone for us. And with the conclusion, which we will hopefully get to in the next month or so, of the prioritization process, that really opens up for us to be able to get into our infrastructure investment scenario planning task. And that's going to be the majority of what we talk through in 2025. So a little bit of a preview. Happy holidays. You can see what's coming next. We're really going to be looking at evaluating various funding policies and looking at how MetroPlan Orlando funds will be used upon the adoption of the 2050 plan. So the pie chart that you see on the slide now is the funding policy that was established as part of the 2045 plan, with MetroPlan Orlando funds being split by the percentages shown there into those 4 different modal categories. As we look to our 2050 plan, we want to make sure that the slices of those pie are right, or do we need to change some of those slices, add a new category? Those will be a lot of the discussions that we're going to be having as we look to make sure that our funding policies reflect the goals, objectives, and indicators that we have for our 2050 plan that we've developed collaboratively, help us achieve our performance measures, and also incorporate looking at the future trends and drivers of change that influence how we get to 2050. So with that, that's the conclusion of my updates on our 2050 plan. Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any questions? I know that you were taking input from each of the cities on your final plan. How are those sometimes some of the notes or some of the requests that we put in, how are they incorporated and then ultimately come out on the end?
So that's referring to our needs assessment work. So we've been working with each of your staffs to make sure that each project that is a need is included within the plan if it's on the federal aid network, so eligible for MetroPlan Orlando funds. That's when it would be included on our standard needs list tables, so the eligible for MPO funding tables. If it's on the local network or anything that's not eligible for MPO funds, we're still keeping track of those requests, and they will eventually be located on our locally funded projects needs tables. So in our 2045 plan, those would be tables 16, 17, and 18, just organized by county. So that way the needs are documented, but we're making it clear that those aren't potentially eligible for MetroPlan Orlando funds, but it's still providing that planning consistency for any of the agencies to be able to pursue other federal grants, discretionary funds from other sources.
What if some of the notes might have been more like 3 laning versus 4 laning, and some of the areas are might be a plan for 4, but maybe the residents want 3 or vice versa. How about when those kind of notes are in there and ultimately on the end, the outcome?
Yeah, so we're using those to update our project descriptions. So one change that we're having, likely won't be on the final published table, but in our background information, we're including more detailed project descriptions for each of these needs. So if you look at our current 2045 plan, you'll see it says project on Main Street from A to B, using very general example terms today, needs a safety improvement. There's a lot of things that could mean, and we want to be able to have a more structured and more detailed project description, just a sentence or 2 at this point in time, to help guide us towards what that potential solution will be. So that's really where it's going to be the most valuable. But it
Got
will
it.
be included. Thank you for
All right,
all of your
thank
help
you.
developing this.
Anyone else? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Next we have, let's see, who is up next? Oh my, Mr. Hill. Welcome back.
Good morning, excuse me. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to give you an update on our EV readiness study. The previous update I did remotely. I'm not sure if you remember, but this is an effort to help build the infrastructure for electric vehicles in our region. So I'm going to just give you a refresher on some of the items I covered my last update, and then go into the topic-specific workshops that we convened. At the previous update, I did review the utility workshop that we held, and I'll touch on that a little bit, but I'll spend most of the time on the workshops we've had since then. Then go into a little bit of the market demand analysis we've completed and public outreach that we want to complete as well. This morning, I have with me JD Chen, who's with Kittleson Associates, project manager on this team, project team manager here. Team project manager, got it right now. So previously, I talked about electric vehicles, and I think I may have surveyed the room and asked, does anyone own an electric vehicle? No, not even a golf cart, but doesn't really count here. How many people plan to get an electric vehicle in the next 10 years? Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, I do. So I talked about the planning context in terms of the federal level, state level, and then local. The regional context in terms of level 1 charging, level 2 charging, then fast charging infrastructure that's currently in place here, some of the policies and some of the forecasts that we're trying to develop. So topic specific workshops, as I mentioned, we covered the utilities workshop that we had in June. And what we heard was there's a need for consistency across the jurisdictions. Similar to a road that goes from Orange County to Seminole County, you want that road to operate the same. So when you're going from one county to the other county, you want, or one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, you want to be able to charge consistently. The utilities identified a lack of technicians. They want that part of the industry to be developed and enhanced. And they would like to have some control over the network. What I mean by that is you may have a private entity that is operating a charging facility and have multiple charging facilities. Well, you want to have access to the information that they are gathering. You want to be able to include that in how you provide them with electricity. And then lastly, they wanted us to pursue some federal funding to cover the region. And we were early in this work, and we decided to draw back from that because one of the things that you want to include in a federal application is something to ask for. And at the point that we were having this discussion, it was not clear what we wanted to ask for. So we kind of held back on it. The policy workshop was on October the 1st. Many of you were invited. We wanted to focus on goals and objectives for the jurisdictions. And we provided some examples of policy and guidance from around the country. What we found is that many of the jurisdictions already have codes and requirements in your land use or comprehensive plans for developers and property owners to provide some facility or access to provide charging facilities. Some of the challenges that you currently experience, parking for extended periods at existing charging facilities. And some of the recommendations or ways to mitigate this, and what I refer to as the child care penalty, is when your child is at child care longer than it should be, you get charged a premium price. So same thing here. If you are there for an extended period of time because someone else wants to charge their vehicle, and range anxiety is one of those challenges for ownership of an electric vehicle, you need to move along. Maintenance and operations. The literature is clear on this. Many of these facilities, when you go to charge, some of them don't work properly. And then the trade-off between level 2 and fast charging. There's a cost difference between those two charging facilities. And what is the benefit cost analysis for you as an owner or operator or someone that's leasing property or space to someone that wants to put one of these charging facilities in? That needs to be rectified. We did talk about this, this piece of legislation that's now in place. It hasn't been implemented. And I believe it's a good statute. The fact that we need to have consistency across the region in terms of charging facilities and how they're operated. So we had some discussion on this as well. And then moving on to our charging infrastructure siting workshop on October the 28th. We wanted to look at the existing infrastructure gaps, again, provide some national guidance. And Kittleson developed a site selection tool so that as you're considering, jurisdictions considering charging facilities, this is a tool you can use to assess that facility and see if there's going to be some usage of that facility. So there's a benefit cost return for either you as the owner or whoever you're leasing that space to. So when we talk about the infrastructure gap, these round circles on the left image represent existing charging facilities. The buffer is a half a mile around that charging facility. And then on the right, you have multi-family housing units, because it's usually those facilities, those housing units that if you own an electric vehicle and you live in an apartment or a condominium complex, and there's only one charging space, well, there's a challenge there. And in some of these housing facilities, they don't have any charging. So how do you provide that charging? Now, if you have your own home, you have solar panels perhaps, then you can charge your car right there in your garage or on your property. But residents in these housing complexes, they may not have that. So we want to, try and close that gap. So Kittleson looked at some national guidance, and these are the themes that they identified. Charging facilities should be accessible. Again, multi-family housing, procurement and installation. I'll speak a little later about the role that as a jurisdiction you can play in this part of the industry. Looking at community charging hubs. These are public parks or gathering facilities where you want to have charging partnerships and collaborations. There are examples of that. That's what's encouraged because as jurisdiction, you may not want to own this facility and be responsible for maintaining it. And again, I mentioned the technical assistance and resources that's needed. So carrying that theme along into the tool that they developed, they applied it to an existing site, which is the OUC Robinson Recharge Hub, just right north of us. And it rates pretty good on the themes in terms of it has electricity, there's ownership, there's good connectivity, and there's access to it. And being downtown, there's a general population that can have access to it as well. So this is just a tool that you as a jurisdiction can use as you're going about the exercise of looking at charging sites. And some of the feedback we got was getting more data. At this particular workshop, we had an individual that is a Tesla owner, and he has an app that shows him where all the charging facilities are. But when we gathered this information, we didn't have that access. So that's just an example of how we need to identify more data and share that data with the utility and charging providers. And then working with local jurisdictions and private interests on anticipated land use. If there's private interest that wants to, again, use some land for a charging facility, just anticipate that. And again, we have this site selection tool that we've developed. The last workshop was on grant application and funding opportunities. The good news about this is that there was a lot of federal funding available for developing charging infrastructure, but that's slowly drying up. It's being used. And the one grant that the utilities wanted us to partner with them on, the charging and fueling infrastructure grant, that one may not be around next year. And I know that Osceola County, again, OUC have applied for some of one of these funding categories. I'm not sure if they've been awarded yet, but this source is starting to get a little bleak, if you will. And also consider these charging facilities as a typical project. I mean, there's a capital expense and there's an operational expense. In terms of financing models, there's pay as you go, put it in your budget. There's debt, you can go ahead and go into debt and support this type of development. And then what we do see a lot is P3s, where you have a lot of charging entities that want to develop in your community. And so they're willing to partner with you on this. A lot of this has been through the use of those federal grants, but again, that's a little challenging now. So decide your role as a jurisdiction. Do you want to be the operator of a charging facility? And there's a host of requirements there. Or do you want to be a landlord where you bring someone in and you just lease this land out and let them go ahead and operate it and provide you with, some revenue? And then you can just step away and just open up some land and allow someone to come in and develop their own facility. So this presentation is available. This information was shared with your staff that participated in these workshops. But it is useful. And again, as you start to see more and more electric vehicles, as each of you start to consider purchasing an electric vehicle, here are some of the ways you can eliminate that range anxiety if you don't have a charger at your home. So market demand, since we know that some of you do not have an electric vehicle, but you may choose to get one in the future because many of the automakers have already started to invest and want to transition their fleets to electric vehicles. Chances are that many of us in this room, our next vehicle will be an EV. This is just an estimate. We just use some current data from FDOT to make this projection. That mustard color, again, it looks like mustard to me. I'm not sure if it's yellow to others, but it looks like mustard to me. Grey Poupon, that's a good flavor too. But that's where we are in the region. This is just an estimate. It's not bankable, but it gives you a sense of where we could be headed in the future and how that translates into some actual numbers. You see the percents across the top, but I believe it's that lower row is where we want to, in terms of closing the gap we want to get to, and that is non-single family homes or multi-family housing units that will need charging capacity. We wanted to include a survey in this work, but it just coincided with the Regional Transportation Survey that MetroPlan Orlando was completing, and we just took that information, and it just shows responses to the survey that we did. And I can tell you, as a young transportation planner, I can remember having to ride buses and survey folks and ask them the question of, we provided more service, would you ride the bus or would you use transit? And everybody was, yeah. Well, usually they don't do it. So this is encouraging, but perhaps take it with a grain of salt. So next, we are going to finalize our public outreach plan and website material and create a planning and monitoring strategy. And we should have this wrapped up by next month, January. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation, and I will try my best to respond to any questions or comments.
Any questions?
Well, more a statement than a question.
One of the problems I see is the parking. We plan for parking in every location. And now you're taking up parking spots for EVs. I can see if that's gonna be a big conflict down the road.
Yeah, and that is one of the comments we did get. And, there's a balancing act that you have to take in trying to address that. And some of it is the demand. If you believe you have the demand in your jurisdiction, then yeah, perhaps you should provide that one space or two for charging. If you do not see that demand, then perhaps it's not a good investment. I'll use the city of Apopka because I know they had a charging facility, but they took it out because it wasn't being used. And I think there are some other jurisdictions that are, trying to create the balance that's needed. I think it's fair to use especially in a public place, to have a parking space or spaces for people to charge. Because the challenge that we often hear is range anxiety. Am I gonna get to where I need to go before my battery dies? So again, it's a balancing act. Not sure if anyone solved it yet, but I do agree with you that has merit.
Well, what I see is retrofitting, adding charging stations to existing businesses already. We just had one open up in Castleberry at a Wawa. And they took up probably 8 or 10 parking spots in a Wawa. So, I see that as a potential problem down the road.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment because Wawa in particular is one of the leaders. I mean, I've seen many Wawa facilities that do have charging. And as a business, they do the projection. And apparently their projections show that, yeah, we need to have these chargers here. The other thing, when you spoke about retrofitting, when I gave this presentation yesterday to the Community Advisory Committee, we had a comment about condominiums, having older condominiums, and the challenge they will have, if required, to retrofit their parking garage or spaces. And the challenge or the cost expense they will have to go through and how they will need to do that. And some of this is incentivizing property owners to make that change in hopes that they will see the opportunity. But it is a challenge, no doubt, it's a challenge.
Is Wawa charging? And if so, how and what do they charge for that?
I don't know. I'm sure that there is some return. Now, the role you want to play, and in this case, what role does Wawa play? Is Wawa the owner and operator of that charger, or are they leasing that space to a charging company? And what is their cut of the revenue that's being generated? Again, that's I'm not privy to how they do that calculation, but that is something that certainly is included in them having those facilities there.
Could we get information of the profit margin on that? But in the town of Oakland, we brought that up. That we want to have our own charging station for Oakland. We have a great exit turnpike, Colonial, and to generate money for our town.
Right.
Would it be profitable or is it going to be cost neutral and headaches?
I don't have that answer right now, but we can go back and we can see what we can pull from existing providers locally within the state and around the country. We can see what we can pull.
Please, thank you.
Sure.
All right, very good. Anyone else? Mayor Slater?
Is there a lot of movement at the state level to try to uniformly come up with some kind of system that allows people to, to Mayor Henson's point, when somebody not hijacks, but uses a city, it's a piece of property. Like essentially, we are dispersing gas stations everywhere. And at the end of the day, if this electric thing catches on, we will have a distributed gas station with a bajillion different owners. There's got to be some more efficient way. Are these discussions already happening? How to unify them? And you sort of touched on it a little bit, like the Wawa people, maybe they can go, rent a 20 by 10 space or 20 by whatever it is, 10 space everywhere.
Some of that is being addressed in the statute that I presented.
Okay.
So again, they want to create some consistency, as you said. And that's part of what that statute is about. And that is also what the utilities want to have, so that they can understand, what they can potentially profit from having or providing energy to charging facilities. So that is what I know right now. I mean, that will certainly change, but that's what I know right now in terms of answering your question.
Is this something that is currently before the state legislature that has, it sounds like it's come up before. I haven't read the statute yet, so it's brand new to me.
Yeah, that's what the statute is trying to address.
So it already has been put into place, or it is?
It is already passed, but it's the implementation part of the statute is being worked on.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Kennedy?
I have a comment and a question, if you don't mind, and the comments are good. You asked if any of us have an electric vehicle. I doubt any of us also have a gas pump at our house. Many of us don't have a reserved parking space at work, but those of us who do don't have a fuel pump there. There's no concise argument, persuasive argument being made. What they're talking about, it doesn't matter what the fuel is. You're changing from centralized to distributed, changing the nature of the distribution of fuel for consumer vehicles. How do we evaluate that? And I haven't seen it, I'm relatively new. I haven't seen that approach evaluated against the criteria that we're supposed to be evaluating, that we're supposed to be identifying with. Can you make that argument?
The argument that
public safety, community, prosperity, the criteria that projects like this, the infrastructure dollars, the distributed network are supposed to be evaluated by. Why isn't there a persuasive argument made for changing to distributed fueling of consumer vehicles in the community?
So moving to electric vehicles.
Not moving to electric vehicles. Distributing the fueling of people's vehicles. We don't do that now. In 100 years, none of us have ever bought a private gas pump for our house.
So distributing gas.
Going from we go to a gas station.
Right. But
we don't fuel our vehicle at home, at work, or at play. And so it's not the argument over the type of fuel, gas or electric. Yeah. It's a question of what this is proposing is spending billions of dollars to create a network to distribute fuel for consumer vehicles.
Right.
Why isn't that evaluated in terms of the criteria and the characteristics of the transportation and infrastructure plans, the 15 criteria that we're supposed to be evaluating?
Right. And so just so I'm clear on your question, why you can charge your vehicle at home if you have an electric vehicle, right? But you can't fuel your internal combustion engine vehicle at home, right? And why hasn't a similar structure been proposed for that as we have currently? That has to do with, I believe, the infrastructure overall. And I would imagine, and this is one of the comments we've gotten in the past, is the fuel industry against that that's just, that industry perhaps not wanting that kind of structure in place. Why electricity? Because electricity current, it goes to your home right now. And so you can have a vehicle there that can be charged. in essence, what we're doing now is we're transitioning the structure from fueling gas stations to gas stations becoming electric stations, where you can go. And I know in Europe, and I mentioned this yesterday in Great Britain, I know they are starting to create and build electric stations, not gas stations. They're making that transition. And why there isn't a gas pump out in our garage? Again, that goes back, I believe, to just the whole industry itself and the way it was structured.
Gas station. Why aren't all the gas stations just having an option for the consumer?
Right. And they can. And again, it's a projection that the owner has to make. And any business makes their projections, or they go through and they calculate, okay, if we make this investment now, what kind of return are we going to get? Some, and this is the example I learned in Atlanta. Going after these grants, there's the local share and then there's the federal share for a grant, right? And so there have been examples where the jurisdiction is partnered with a charging company, and the charging company provides that local match for the grant. And they do it as a loss leader because they're cutting their costs. They're putting in level 2 charging facilities. So it's going to take you a while to charge your car. But it's the advertising is where they're making their revenue. Because while you're there, you're being fed.
Watching ads while you're waiting.
You're either watching ads or you're getting some type of promotion. And you get that now. I know I've experienced it now. When you go to, you mentioned Wawa. When you go to Wawa and I fill up my car, right there on the screen, I'm being told to go inside and get a sandwich. Okay. Well, that's how some of these electric charging companies, that's how they're seeing it. And this is at the front end. But the understanding on the back end is where they're going to really make some profit.
I feel like this is becoming a challenge for all the city, town, and villages. Can we put it into our permitting and say anybody who's wants to build a Wawa's racetrack, Buckeye needs to have Buc-ee's needs to have electric, and then it doesn't fall into our problem having to figure out where to put 3 spots, 8 spots around town. We just mandate to everybody who wants to put a gas station that it has to have the option.
Okay. And so what we want to do with this study is provide you with that information and some examples on language that you can use to get to that end.
Well, to address the elephant in the room, the way we provide funding for transportation, that model has to change. I've been preaching this for a couple of years now. The more and more fuel efficient vehicles we have, and the more and more EVs are out there, our gas tax is going down every year, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We've got to come up with a different funding source for transportation.
Well, Mayor, and for some of the staff that are in the room that can remember this, that was something that I brought forward to our board, our policy board, and our committees many years ago to address. And I took a lot. I took a good beating on that one. But yeah, you're right. How do we replace what we're losing and what we will continue to lose? And whether it's electric vehicles or not, vehicles are becoming more and more fuel efficient. And it not only it's not only a concern for how we build and maintain our roads, but how do we fund our other modes? Transit, for example, their funding comes from fuel tax. So it's not just the road side that's losing, it's the transit side that's losing as well. So yeah, you make a great point.
All right, any others? All right, thank you very much for a lively discussion.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have connection to the Sanford International Airport study with Mr. Hoffman. Welcome.
Good morning. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Will Hawthorne. I serve as the Director of Transportation Planning and Policy at the Central Florida Expressway Authority. I want to thank MetroPlan for inviting us to be here to provide an update not only on the 417 Sanford Airport Connector, but all of the planning projects we have going on throughout our region. So today we'll cover 5 projects, 2 on our existing system, one on 417, one on 429. And then we have 3 new alignments in the works, which are 538 Southport Connector, 515 the Northeast Connector, and then the 417 Sanford Airport Connector. Our first PD&E we'll cover is section of 417 that extends from 528 on the south end and goes about 7 miles north up to 408 on the north end. The key changes here would be adding 1 additional lane in each direction, as well as implementing our flex lanes through this segment. So if you're not familiar with the flex lanes, I'm sure you've seen those on 417 and parts of 429, but basically what that allows us to do is to open up a shoulder in the event of an incident, and in the future, when capacity is reached, we can open up that shoulder in rush hour events. So we'll have an additional 7 miles of flex lane that would be usable for this segment of 417. We kicked off the study in May of this year. We should have it wrapped up in May of 2025. As for right-of-way impacts, we really only anticipate that to occur for our stormwater ponds, and we're actually kind of sharpening our pencil right now to see if we can fit everything within the right-of-way we have. So we'll have that completed in the next couple of months to know if we'll need a couple acres here and there to meet the new permitting rules. Next project is pretty much a mirror image of 417. This is on the west side of town. On 429, it extends from Sidell Road north up to Tilden Road. We tie at Sidell Road. This ties into where the limits of our jurisdiction tie into Turnpike. This is again pretty much identical to 417 with the exception of the number of lanes. So this segment of 429 has 2 in each direction. We're looking at adding 1 more in each direction, as well as flex lanes through this segment as well. So the flex lanes currently end at Tilden Road. That's under construction, being tied up, I think, by the end of this year. So this project will take that additional 7 miles all the way down to Sidell Road and actually tie into some of the improvements that the Turnpike is working on their segment of 429. Again, this started in May. We should have this one wrapped up in May of this year. And same story with the right-of-way. We originally anticipated some minor right-of-way takes to increase our pond size to meet the new permitting rule, but it's looking like we may not need that. But we have to run through all the analysis and make sure that we can fit it within the right-of-way we have. Okay, next up are our new alignment PD&Es. We'll start with the Southport Connector, which is shown in orange. And then we'll cover the Northeast Connector, which is shown in purple. Now, when you look at these 2 projects from this perspective, you begin to see how critical these 2 connections are for regional relief in Osceola County. When coupled with the 534 extension, as well as the Point Santa Parkway extension that we have under design, and then FDOT's I-4 Point Santa Connector, which is a little dash line connecting 538 and 429, you see how you start to get some real relief and some reliable travel times for the residents of Osceola County. First one we'll start with is the State Route 538 Southport Connector Expressway. It's a new alignment that starts at Koa Street on the left side of the slide, or the west end, heads south for just a bit, and then goes into the Cypress Parkway transportation corridor that exists today. We would be co-located there. We would relocate the Cypress Parkway to the outside of the right-of-way, or to the edges of the right-of-way. Be co-located all the way through to Pleasant Hill Road. We would cross through existing right-of-way that over Reedy Creek. And then as you extend out to the east, you notice the study area expands out quite a bit. And there's 3 different alignments in consideration there. Those are being coordinated with Osceola County to be consistent with their South Lake Toho master plan. It's about a 15-mile corridor that, again, has a co-location within Cypress Parkway and ultimately ties into the turnpike with a full systems interchange. And then we'll have a temporary intersection or termini at Canoe Creek Road. Some of the recent developments with this project on the eastern end of the corridor have been, and this has been very popular with the public, but we recently updated our traffic projections, and Cypress Parkway today is 4 lanes. If you drive it, you're going to hit congestion at some point in that corridor at 10 a.m., 2 a.m., 8 p.m., whatever. I mean, it's constantly congested. So as part of our project, not only will we have our regional expressway, but we're going to widen and improve Cypress Parkway for the local commute as well. So that's now would be part of our project if this does move forward. Additionally, we're coordinating with the wildlife corridor agencies in Orange and Osceola County to look for opportunities on where those could be reasonably located. So that coordination continues. We recently held an informal public meeting in Point Siena, and we had pretty positive feedback on the fact that not only are we providing a regional connection, but we're improving that local trip for them. So they'll be able to get to the CVS Publix to get their gallon of milk, in 5 minutes versus 30 minutes. Our next steps will be our alternatives public meeting, which we anticipate that to be in Q1. It's looking like it's going to be in March of 25. That is where we'll have all of the alternatives fully baked. We'll have the cost estimates, right-of-way impacts, the matrices put together to kind of tell the picture on what corridor makes sense. Now, it's important to keep in mind that a no build is still an option as part of all of these PD&E studies. So it's not a foregone conclusion that this is going to happen. The no build is still part of that matrix, and it's compared against the other alternatives as we go through this. Once we get through the alternatives public meeting, we hope to get to our public hearing in Q4 of 2025 with seeking our board's approval on a recommended alternative in December of 2025. Continuing east, this is the State Route 515 Northeast Connector Phase 2 Expressway. This ties into the Southport Connector Expressway study area, which on the very left side is the turnpike. Extends a pretty large area up into the northeast. This study area is, I think, bigger than the city of St. Cloud and Kissimmee combined. So it's a very large area. We kicked off this project with 7 corridors to analyze. We have since knocked out 3 of those. We're further analyzing the 4 you see on the left side of the screen and doing further analysis and data collection on those. Due to the size of this study, we do have an extended schedule that goes about 30 months. And this corridor, just to put it in perspective, these alignments are anywhere from 20 to 23 miles long. So this is quite a connection for the area. The right-of-way width for a new segment of the expressway like this is a multimodal corridor of 330 feet wide. So we normally have a 300. We added another 30 feet to accommodate some form of multimodal in the future. Now on the right side are all of the active developments in the area, as well as the large property owners. And you can see these are in various stages of development. You can see how the window for getting some sort of corridor through here is rapidly closing. So trying to get through this as diligently as we can, and hopefully to provide that regional relief for this segment of Osceola County. As for the schedule, we have had our first round of advisory group meetings. We have an environmental advisory group, project advisory group, community engagement group, which is your HOAs, your larger landowners, things like that. And then we have our environmental stewardship committee. So we've had all of those from the initial kickoff. we're working towards our official public kickoff next spring in 2025. And then we'll have a public hearing scheduled for sometime in Q4 of 2026. So we still have a little bit of time on this one, but wanted to provide an update nonetheless. So our last and final corridor we have underway, and the primary reason for us being here this morning is the State Route 417 Sanford Airport Connector. With me today is David Dangle. He's our consultant project manager, and he's here to assist with any questions or any discussions that, you know, come into specificity for this project. Okay, so some of you may recall we just wrapped up, I say just, I mean, it was in 2023, but we completed our concept, feasibility, and mobility study in 2023. We quickly turned that around and went into the next step of our project life cycle, which is the PD&E study. The corridors being analyzed here are roughly 2 to 3 miles in length. And it does have, because this is kind of a unique project for us, but it does have a reduced typical sections. We're not doing the full 330 feet expressway. This will pretty much be one lane in each direction, roughly 140, 150 feet wide. So these are really long ramps, essentially, that are acting as a reliever to Lake Mary Boulevard and to simplify access to the airport. From a schedule perspective, we do have a 12-month schedule on this one. We kicked it off in May, I'm sorry, of this year. We are working towards a alternatives public meeting in January. Right before that, we'll again have all of our EAG, PAG, CEG meetings on that to gather input from those advisory groups, kind of put that into the matrix, and then go out to the public to present to them all of the options that we have. Again, no build option is one of those. Once we get through the alternatives public meeting in 2025, we will proceed with a public hearing in April of 2025. And hopefully we'll be in front of our board in May or June of 25 to present our recommended preferred alternative. Now, aside from the corridors you see here, these are pretty fat lines on a map. David and his team are continuing to make geometric tweaks. We're clipping a little bit of a parcel. We can try to pull off of that, so we're not, we can try to make it more efficient on where these corridors go. So David's been working through that. Again, the primary purpose of this is relief on Lake Mary Boulevard. The interchange 417 Ronald Reagan is, there's improvements that have happened there, but the growth that's coming, I think there's roughly 800 homes just in this study area that are already coming out of the ground. So Lake Mary Boulevard is going to reach capacity very quickly, and that's the purpose and need of this project. That said, the newest development is we do have some preliminary traffic projections for 2050, what traffic would look like at that time. The no build on Lake Mary Boulevard between 417 and Red Cleveland is about 36,000 AADT, or average annual daily trips. Then you start to build in individual corridors, and how does that affect the traffic network? So alignment 1 on the far right side comes in second place. That has about a 43% relief on Lake Mary, to that blue segment you see. Alignments 2, 3A, and 3D, very almost identical in length, very similar location. They all have these same traffic projections. Those provide the most relief for Lake Mary Boulevard. And then the fourth item, which is the viaduct, that has the least amount of relief. It only carries about 8,900 trips. I did inquire with our traffic and revenue consultant what would be driving that, and they said, it really boils down to the trip. If you take the starting point, which is a toll plaza on 417, that's where you're either going to get off at one of the 1, 2, or 3 alignments, or if you were to take 4, it's a little bit more circuitous. So it's also a bit of a backwards movement. You're going northeast to come back, or northwest to come back and go east, and vice versa in the opposite direction. So that's what's driving some of the traffic projections coming down for the viaduct option. So why is the traffic so important? We take these numbers, we then apply some sort of toll rate to it to finally get to a project feasibility. At the end of the day, these need to meet bonding requirements. We're working through that process now. We take into consideration the traffic projections, the cost of each alternative, what the revenue would be for it, and see if that balances out, if it meets our bonding covenants that we usually try to meet. You know, it's paying off about half the project in a bondable period of time, 30 to 40 years. So that's a big step in this project to have the traffic. Again, we're working on the cost estimates and hope to have all of that ready to present to the public in January of this coming of 2025. That really wraps up my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Anyone? Jordan?
For the Sanford Airport, can you access the alignments coming from either way on 417?
From a commuter rail?
No, can you access the alignments coming from either north or south on 417?
South. Right now, we're only looking at ramps to and from the south.
Okay.
We are going to look at it to see if it's possible from the north. That's not that much of a traffic generator. So you'd be absorbing a lot of costs for very little traffic benefit, but it is something we're going to try to look at so that we don't preclude it in the event something changes in the future. But it is mainly to and from the south.
Gotcha. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.
Likewise. I think we now have Best Foot Forward annual report with it was Ms. Bush, but now.
Yeah, Vince Dyer. So I am the manager of the Best Foot Forward program.
Welcome, Vince.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me today. I'm glad to be here. So we just wanted to go over some of our activities over the past fiscal year for the Best Foot Forward Pedestrian Safety Program. And so some kind of high-level highlights. I don't need to read all these stats to you, but maybe point a few things out. That big number you see under evaluation, that's staged crossings. That is every time our data collectors cross the street throughout the entire year. So they cross over 25,000 times. This is kind of throughout the Metro Plan region, different cities and counties, which we'll dig into on the next slide a little bit. Enforcement, we had a lot of participation throughout the year, over 800 warnings and citations handed out. And we like to think that each time someone gets one, not only are they going and telling people what happened, but then they're also seeing the coverage on the news, the media impact of it. I actually, before I ever worked for Bike Walk Central Florida, learned that it was the law to stop for pedestrians at crosswalks on the news because of the Best Foot Forward program. So we know that this message is getting out to the public. And so we're just trying to get everyone to recognize that that is the law in Florida and that they do have to be very aware as they're going through crosswalks. For engineering, we had 14 different locations that had engineering improvements of some sort, whether that was engineering alone or combined with enforcement. And on average, those crosswalks that had engineering improvements went up 25% in driver yield rate. So 25% more drivers were stopping for pedestrians at those intersections that had those improved signs, markings, beacons, et cetera. And we also made 136 engineering recommendations. So at the end of every year, we do a complete evaluation with the Public Works team about the crosswalks. We let them know what we would do at these intersections based on what we see throughout the region and throughout the other counties. We're now up to 9 counties that we are in throughout FDOT District 5. And then finally, education, over 15,000 resources distributed, over 7,000 people reached. And so we'll talk a little bit more about each of those numbers kind of as we go through. So real quick, just looking at the data, because this is our bread and butter, is taking data at intersections on how often drivers are yielding. 78 crosswalks, 3 county partners, it's Orange, Osceola, and Seminole within Metro Plan. And we have our 8 city partners. Seminole includes Castleberry, Longwood. Osceola was St. Cloud and Kissimmee. And then here in Orange County, we have Oakland, Orlando, Winter Park, and Apopka. So 16 of our crosswalks that we monitored improved from enforcement alone. Of those crosswalks, they averaged 12% improvement. That's just from law enforcement going out and handing out warnings and citations for people that don't yield. So pretty good improvement, especially when you consider a road of 10,000 drivers. That's 1,200 potential interactions each day that drivers are now yielding to pedestrians where they didn't before. If you think about it that way. 9 of our crosswalks improved from engineering alone. Those went up 26%. Some of those include like the flashing beacons, the overhead pedestrian signals. So really good jump from that. And then there were a number that had both engineering and enforcement. So a lot of the more lower cost engineering combined with enforcement, those went up an average of 22%. So just want to go through a few. Again, I'm not going to go through all of them because there's a ton. From enforcement alone, Jason Dwelly Parkway and Apopka next to Jason Dwelly Park improved 6% with a couple of enforcements, 15 warnings and citations. In Seminole County, this is next, pretty close to a middle school. It's a school crossing, 34 warnings and citations over a couple of enforcements, went up 14%. In Orange County, this is one of our more dangerous ones, Dean Road and Timber Oaks Court. It's right in front of a church. It went from 10% of drivers yielding, pretty wide road, a lot of traffic going through, up to 20 with a couple of enforcements. They were handing out warnings and citations here like crazy because it's a scary intersection. Down in Kissimmee, this is where I live. I'm a proud Kissimmee resident. Took the Sunrail up this morning. It was a great trip. They hit this one every single time. They've done 172 warnings and citations over the last 2 years. That's 8 enforcements. Over those 2 years, went up 15% from 16% of drivers yielding to 31. This is on the Emery Canal Trail. You can see in the picture there, people take their bikes across this one. And so that's one that we are really glad to see get some traction. Out in Oakland, FDOT put a 5-second leading pedestrian interval. So essentially just giving 5 seconds of head start to pedestrians. This is engineering. 35% increase just from reprogramming the signal timing. Okay, so super cheap, super effective. Some other engineering, mid-block pedestrian signal over an Oak Ridge Road. This already had flashing beacons at it. So 63% of drivers were yielding with just the 2 beacons on the side. The center sign did not have a beacon on it. They just replaced the whole thing with a pedestrian signal. So this only activates when the pedestrian presses the button, and went up to 80% of drivers yielding. And over in Longwood, they saw Castleberry last year putting in these in-street signs in. Castleberry had some massive success putting these signs in over the last couple of years, and Longwood was a little jealous. So they looked for a couple of locations where they could put it into. One was here right in front of Longwood Elementary. Huge improvement. These signs are like, for how cheap they are, a miracle. 33% before, 78 after. So that's, yeah, right in the middle. Yeah. So they're just as effective as like a flashing beacon. And yeah, it's a post. So, and the main concern that we hear from Public Works is they don't have to go out and replace it over and over again. That does have to happen occasionally. But when you consider the cost versus the benefit, there's no comparison. Then over in St. Cloud, Budinger and Peghorn, they've been hitting this with enforcement last year a lot. This is next to Budinger Park. And so they put in a flashing beacon, went up 48% from 33 to 81% of drivers yielding at this intersection. And we had a few that had both engineering and enforcement kind of consistently. So over in Castleberry, I mentioned that they've been in on these in-street signs. They put some more in at Winter Park and Bridle Path, went from 26 to 57%. Keep in mind that 57% is our year-long average. So half of it was before they put the signs in, half of it was after. If we're just taking the after, it's been about 70-ish% of drivers yielding just in the after effect. And then St. Cloud, 17th in Delaware. This one, they just put an extra yellow sign. So they had a yellow sign on one side, but not the other. So putting that in along with enforcement led to a 13% increase. So a lot of different types of intersections that we're able to kind of track. This one we're really excited about. Hunt Club and Wekiva Neighborhood Trail increased 30% with some stop here for pedestrian signs on both sides. The county has actually decided that they're going to put a flashing beacon in here. We had a lot of active community support for this one. They wanted to see the median flattened out so that bikes could go through it because there was kind of a lip going over. So they did that as well. We had Florida Freewheelers Executive Director kind of honing in on this crosswalk as well. So we're kind of coming at them at the same time. And she mentioned that she wanted to do maybe a project for her Girl Scout troop. I said that some places use like the flags to cross, maybe like, some elementary schools could design that. We told Mike Flynn over at Seminole County, he was like, don't do that. We'll just put in a flashing beacon. So he is agreed to that. He said he expects it to come in the next 6 months. So for education, not getting too deep into it, you guys already know about our community events and presentations and pop-up events. I tried to get some different representation from different counties. One thing that's new this past year is our sign waving campaign. So toward the end of the year, we were really trying to figure out a way to get more education at the crosswalks themselves. Obviously, we have the enforcements. That's like our major educational event at the crosswalks. But, going to these different like Kissimmee Women's Club presentations, these community events at different parks or whatever, not necessarily right next to the crosswalk. So it's hard to track if there's an effect with that. So just here at the end of the year, end of the fiscal year in August, September, we started doing a few of these sign waving campaigns. Got some great feedback from our partners, lots of good interactions with drivers, honks and waves and stuff, bringing visibility to the crosswalk. And if you can see in the picture, they're hard to tell. It says less than 20% of drivers yield to pedestrians at this crosswalk. So something that drivers can see and recognize as they go through. And so we've seen some good results from that. So far, a couple of the intersections we did these sign wavings at have seen some improvements of 7 to 10% since then. Obviously, we don't like to make any determinations based off of like one round of data collection. So I would go out 6 times throughout the year. So we'll obviously keep you guys informed on the effect of those sign waving campaigns. Some other stuff going on Bike Walk Central Florida that I'm a little less knowledgeable about, but know some. We did the Bike 5 event recently in October, had lots of participation. This kind of goes through 5 different cities throughout Seminole and Orange counties. So getting people on their bikes, finding safe routes to the places they like to go. We've also established our Bike Walk Kids program, going out to schools and other community events, doing helmet fittings, distributing information on safety. We are going to be participating in the Jordan Sporting Goods event coming up, the Rolling Strolling event, in Apopka as well. And we do various helmet fitter trainings throughout the year. And some other activities going on in Bike Walk are Healthy West Orange Trails Connection. I know that they've been working hard on various trails connections, working with the grant programs of trail enhancements. We do trail audits with people of the different jurisdictions where this is happening. The Pine Hills Trail Safety Audit is an example of that. We make recommendations based on what we see during those. And in terms of active transportation, we're also helping to create signature trail maps over in Seminole County, doing the Oakland Sidewalk Study and how those connect with the trails. So we're looking to get more of those connections for our bikers as well. So now that was a bunch of information all at once. I'll kind of open it up to some questions. I'll go back to any slide you guys are kind of interested in focusing in on.
Anyone? Scott?
You kind of got to it at the end, which was my question. I'm in Ocoee, and we have a serious problem with the West Orange Trail crossings at places like Clarcona, Ocoee Road, et cetera. How do you explain to me, maybe a little more in detail, how you interact with those? Are they governed by you? I noticed none of your studies were on the trail. Is that a separate project? And
yes.
How do I get funding? Where does the funding come from for those signs if I want them? The engineering, is that through here? Where does that come from?
Not through us. So what we do for Best Foot Forward is we're taking the data, doing the education, coordinating the enforcements, things like that. We make recommendations to FDOT, to the cities, to the counties on what we think would work at those intersections based on what we see in other places. A lot of times when these intersections are picked, a lot of them are trail crossings or school crossings. They're already planning on doing improvements there anyway. They just want to track the effect of the data. So we're not doing anything magical. We're allowing the cities and counties to do what they do best, and we're empowering them with the data and the other intersections that have kind of similar characteristics in terms of number of lanes, speed limit, the amount of traffic that goes through. So we can see what worked in one place and try it in another location, give some feedback on what's worked well. Those in-street signs are one that a lot of people were hesitant about, but we have the data to back up how well they worked when implemented the right way. Obviously, they don't work everywhere. Faster roads, more lanes, it's not going to work, right? So in terms of getting crosswalks on the list for improvements, We can take the data for sure, but we unfortunately don't have any kind of funding to do those projects ourselves. We're just empowering you guys with the data and giving the public the education so that drivers are more aware when they go through these intersections.
So the areas I'm talking about and the complication that we have is those are county roads, West Orange Trail. We have a hard time even getting new development because they won't let us cut the trail, et cetera. Can I fund those through my city budget?
Potentially, I don't have hardly any knowledge about trails and stuff like that. I mostly just focus on.
Awesome. Thank you, I
pedestrian.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Okay, we're drawing to a close here. A couple things, general information. There's several items under general information at tab 4 in your agenda packets. Upcoming meetings, November 13th, Metro Plan Orlando Board meeting has been, that was, should have been not November 13, but we'll cover the board meeting. Wednesday, December, oh, okay, the council meeting will be at the December 11th. Our next MAC meeting is February 6th, 9:30 a.m. So mark your calendars. We have a month off in there. Now we're to the member comments. Anyone? I have a couple things. One, there is a Florida League of Cities offering an ethics training virtual toward the end of the year. If anybody needs to, make sure you get that done. Also, December 12th, Tri-County League of Cities, we're having a holiday event up at the which one? Waste Pro Management Museum. We deal with waste management all the time, so we got to go see a museum about it. Y'all need to come. So now we have public comments. If any members of the public wish to comment, please use the raise hand function. You will be recognized on or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll unmute your mic. After you are recognized, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comment to 2 minutes. Do we have anyone joining us virtually?
No hands raised online.
And do we have any members here public with any?
No public comment, but I just wanted to point out that Mayor Foraker did join the meeting online, so I noted for the record that he was present.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. And do we have any written comments for it?
None.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.